Cool. Hey, Sean, how you doing?
Good, man. What's happening?
Same old, same old. So we were talking about LinkedIn the other day, and the setup here is the like random friend invite from a completely different market segment or industry or business that you get, or the connection request. I guess it's not friend invite; it's because it's business. But like anyway, you get this like random like, hey, I want to be part of your network. And then you make the critical error of saying yes, and then what happens? You get the
Man for
flood.
days.
Absolutely. So I want to talk about that because like clearly it might work for somebody, maybe, or they're just all replicating each other's behavior. It's hard to say.
Yeah, I think I've only seen this work in theory, largely by lead generation services that are selling you this crap. So I clearly am very biased, but so take that with a grain of salt. However, I'm the target for a lot of it, so I get it all day, every day, and I need a place to vent, so I'm going to do that here.
Nice.
But what I really like to talk about is so much of it is done so poorly, and how damaging that can be to your brand, just counterproductive as an exercise overall, and the fact that a lot of people have had negative experiences with these services. They promise wonderful things, right? As in, I could turn on a lead generation service, or like, let's just take a step back for a moment and say, you've got a service or a product or whatever it is that you offer, and it provides value for customers, but you want more of those customers, right? You want more of a scalable, repeatable kind of solution for lead flow. You want to be able to find customers more easily so that you can grow, right? Totally natural thing. Every business goes through it. And then along comes a lead generation service, and it offers you this wonderful, supposedly, solution out of the box, which is going to be like, if you remember back from the infomercial days with the set it and forget it approach, where it's just going to be like automatic, right? Sure, we'll have your calendar full in no time flat. You're going to have customers coming at you begging for your services because of what it is that we do, which is spam your customers on your behalf. Like,
Have you
who doesn't
ever
love being sold to that way?
so so like and I don't mean to hijack here, but like have you ever been to one of those meetings where like the person on the other end of the call, you both are looking at each other like a deer in the headlights, like, so why are you here? And you're like, I don't know, I got promised a free toaster with purchase kind of thing, and I'm here for the toaster. And you're like, those
That was
kinds
my
of things,
experience.
like they're poorly qualified at best if you can get them
Totally.
on the line, if you're not wasting your time trying to make an appointment that never shows up, right?
Yep. And that was my experience. I mean, I bought it hook, line, and sinker way back when. I tried one. It was a dumpster fire of an experience, but I learned, right? And then ultimately the meetings, and for those of us listening, just audio, I'm doing my fancy air quotes over here. The meetings that I got and the people that I actually met, I don't think they really knew why they were there. And they definitely weren't people that I wanted to speak with. So it was exactly that. It's like, I don't know why I'm here, and I don't know why you're here. So this is clearly not working. Right. And the amount of volume that it takes to get those dismal results were just, the whole thing was just a depressing exercise, but informative nonetheless. So anyway, what I'm trying to get at here is that bad outreach is definitely not worth it. It does way more harm than good. And it's just not, it's going to be totally counterproductive. So be careful with the overpromise, underdeliver options that are out there when it comes to this kind of stuff. And I want to talk a little bit more about that as an experience as well, too, because it, even if it isn't via service, right? If it's something that you're doing, or maybe you're using, this can get really tricky too, like some of the automation out there, whether it's email or LinkedIn or whatever, right? Punching in variables, you're grabbing a ton of emails, whatever, and you're just same type of approach, like spamming a bunch of people, hoping to get meetings or sales or whatever, and you're just not, then is that process really worth it? I don't know. That's my take on it, Brian. What do you think?
So it's difficult, right? Because you'll see folks out there, and I've saw this on LinkedIn just this week. Folks saying like, just just try, it's all going to work out, right? Get your message out there, and the right people will hear it. But there's a huge difference between getting your message out there and showing up. I mean, I liken this to showing up at someone else's wedding and going, "Hey, you looking for a date?" Like that's not the way this goes, right? This connection request is about, or the way that this stuff works is should be about nurturing relationships. And you're not going to nurture relationships with the folks that are showing up for like the free gift with purchase or the promise of something that's like way outrageous. And that's the way a lot of these folks start their requests. Like, hey, are you looking to get to your next $1 billion? And here's the plan. We're going to spam everyone on LinkedIn. And if you get 1% of that, then you win. That that whole model is really challenging. To your point, on the other side of it, you don't know that that's broken until you try it. And
Or
so,
are you
I mean,
receiving messages like that all day, every day?
right. I mean, that's a way to look at it by proxy, right? But you
Yeah,
yourself, haven't bought the services like this in the past, and me having
yeah.
done the same. It's really alluring as like you just the
It's
numbers
attractive for
game, and
sure.
you play it's like a lottery ticket. You play like, well, it doesn't matter, right? It's extremely unlikely
Yeah.
that I'm going to win, but you look at those numbers. All I have to do is win
Spray and
once.
pray.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
So
It's
how do you
it's
how do you?
akin to, I see it. Oh, sorry, go ahead.
No, I was just gonna say, how do you curb that, and at the same time, like invest in the right stuff? Because you want,
Yeah.
I think the addiction there is the fast results, right? Like the somebody else
Right.
can do it for me, and I get there quicker.
Automated.
Yeah, yeah. So how do you
Totally.
temper that?
Yeah, I mean, I think what we're describing here, right, is the approach that many take, and it's the I refer to as the "Hey, you buy this" approach, as in we don't know each other, but let's get married, right?
Yeah, yeah.
And no one ever on earth is ever looking to do that. So if that's the approach that you're taking, right, and look at it from the perspective of your buyer, right? If you're purchasing one of these services or investing in one of these processes, and it's just spamming messages of people, what if you receive one of those messages? Would you buy from you? If not, then they probably won't either, right? So put yourself in their shoes and consider the experience from their perspective to see whether or not that's really what you want to be doing here. So if that approach is ineffective, then the question I think you have is what is, right? So for the
So
folks that we work with, the podcast chef, they're selling B2B services. And it's hard to like people do business with people that they like, they know, they have a relationship with, right? It's not a whole lot of, like I said, hey, you buy this. We're like, oh, thank God. I've been desperate for someone to spam me with the 37th message on building website services or whatever it is I may need today. So let me just buy this because it's the 37th message or something, whatever. Like it's just like the math at this point just so far removed from reality from my perspective that I don't understand why anyone possibly ever would. But the better approach is, like we say, approach them like they're people, right? Like just out and approach them potentially like you might like to be approached, right? Do you want to know who these people are and what they do and how they do it before you decide whether or not to go in business together? More than likely, many of us do, right? So why wouldn't you start with something more along the lines of that, right? There aren't a lot of companies out there selling, in particular, B2B services via agencies where it isn't heavily relationship based. And if it's relationship based, then just spamming people or trying to go direct to a sell is way too strong, way too fast. So instead, my opinion, you need something that is valuable for them. And then you need to lead with that as your offer, right? And it isn't, hey, let me sell you this. It's something along the lines of what they actually care about. Like, what can you offer them that can get you, that can enable you to help start building the relationship? And then as you get to know each other a little bit better, who knows? Maybe there's an opportunity to work together. Maybe there is, maybe there isn't. Maybe there's an opportunity now. Maybe there's an opportunity in the future. But either way, you're not going to get that shot if you just lead with that super aggressive, low odds approach.
so you raise an important point. So let's just as a hypothetical exercise, like imagine that it worked, right? Imagine you're selling a $50,000 service offering, and through a single LinkedIn request for some spam sort of manufacturing company, you go and you accept, and they write that check. As the business owner, are you going to trust it? Like seriously, like, oh yeah, we've had interactions for less than 5 minutes. I'm selling a medium to big ticket product or service, um, and they buy with no lead in.
Yeah.
That's really also, as the person who's trying to buy a service like this, super suspect, right? You're not
Just
going to
not how the
want
world
that,
works. Like it
right?
just doesn't work that way. If you think it works that way, then you're wrong. I've tried to sell stuff that way. It doesn't work. So by all means, if you think it does work that way, show me the proof and I'll believe it.
It doesn't, I mean, again, like just hypothetically, if that exercise was successful, these are not folks that are going to be your long-term clients. These are folks that are going to be a flash in the pan revenue at best if that check clears. So I would definitely not trust it for sure, because again, it is a low trust approach to building relationships. And that's what I think is probably the single most important part. It's not just the sort of scumbag sales tactics. It's not a relationship. It's spam. And I don't know about you, but I love watching those shows where they'll take on the spammers, like the
Yeah,
whole
they're amazing.
Nigerian prince thing, where like they actually take the bait and they take it hard with the intent of gaming the spammer. That kind of stuff where you start to kind of look and go, okay, let's just hypothetically imagine this was super successful. How would that experience be as a business owner? And very quickly, even if it did work, which you and I both kind of agree it doesn't, it's got zero chance of being effective. But even if it did, it doesn't represent, it's not a good representation of the type of clients you're going to want. I think this gets back to the idea that a good client doesn't necessarily just have a check and a pulse. They've got to be more than that. They've got to be the beginning of a relationship. There are clients that could pay me, 10x what I'm normally getting, used to getting paid, and I still wouldn't work with them because that experience was awful. So, I mean, from a quality control perspective, this also is just kind of wrong.
Yeah, if you're selling higher touch services, I mean, you're going to want to do some qualification on your side as well too, right? So, and just based on the filters you have on LinkedIn, that may not give you enough to really know whether or not you can help this client. Because there's people out there that might buy, but you can't move the needle for them. And that's not going to lead to a successful outcome either. So you're going to want the opportunity to be able to do some qualification on your part as well too, which again, all gets back to relationship-based selling, right? I need a relationship with you. I need to learn a little bit more about your situation. I need to better understand the problems or challenges that you're experiencing to know whether or not the offerings that I have can move the needle for you, maybe. And if they can, I can figure out how to position them appropriately at the right time, right? As we're figuring out whether or not or how we can help each other, right? Because that's what people and respective networks do for one another. And this is all too, I'll just caveat this by saying this is all very heavily focused on selling B2B services, which are customizable, sometimes intricate, right? There's a little bit of nuance required and some explanation often required to truly understand what they are. And a lot of these companies, you go right to their website, you can't even necessarily tell what it is that they do. And that's why it's helpful to have a person involved and a conversation to be able to kind of qualify and figure that out. The other thing that I'll share too is that there may be people listening and they're like, well, I've done cold email and it's worked to a certain extent, right? I think worked is something you need to qualify because it depends on what you consider to be worked, right? And if it's 1% or less, I don't consider that to be working. I consider that to be 99% failure. And especially if I don't have, thousands and thousands of prospects, which many don't, that are selling these like high touch B2B services, especially if the average deal size is a little bit larger. The other thing that I'll mention is that I think times have changed to a certain extent now, right? Like way back when, a couple of years back, money was very cheap. Interest rates were very low. The economy was humming along despite the challenges from the pandemic. But keeping those interest rates significantly lower made borrowing a lot easier and cheaper, which meant that growth was somewhat unchecked across various industries and spending was very intense as well also. So people were in a buying mode, which lowered the barrier to entry in terms of some of these strategies having some level of effectiveness. But the prevailing sentiment at the moment for those that I know that are investing in this, in terms of the data that I've been collecting, the research that I've been doing, is that most of that has stopped at this point. Now that interest rates have risen, inflation has been growing, things like that, right? Companies are constricting a little bit more in terms of the budget that they're spending. Cost cutting has become more prominent. Those types of things people are getting back to the basics. They're focusing on the fundamentals, the economics, and they're making sure that where they're spending budget is an area where they're highly likely to get value and it addresses specific problems. So because of all of that, that has reduced the effectiveness, which in my opinion was already kind of meager, even when times were perfect for it to be successful. to the extent where people are getting significantly less effectiveness from its baseline, and for some, it's not working at all.
Yeah, I mean, so back to your point there, for different product lines, if you're selling retail, if you're selling product, if you're selling hospitality or in the food service or whatever, that's a completely different, almost 100% different approach to marketing. When you're talking about B2B services, though, where they have that consultative approach, essentially the consultations are getting harder because folks are looking for a much more direct throughput for ROI, which is great, right? It means if you solve problems for real, there's a good chance your conversion rates will go up in a down market, and I've seen that. I've seen that personally myself, as folks stop looking for the latest flash in the pan and start looking for that proof of efficacy. The consultative selling approach, the relationship-based selling approach, increases in both efficacy and value. So everything here is kind of the right direction, regardless of the sort of economic weather systems that are currently prevailing. I think it's important to, again, qualify kind of what long-term success looks like as well, because a lot of the sort of flash in the pan marketing stuff that is tried, it doesn't pass the test over time, and I think that's the other like key part of anything that you're doing here. Is if you're a business owner like me, you're trying to build a system that's repeatable. I want to be able to turn on the faucet and turn it off when I want to. And you need to be able to do both of those things.
So,
thanks for listening to this episode of The Consulting Trap. If you have suggestions for future episodes or would like to be a guest on our show, please send me an email at brian@podcastchef.com. That's BRIAN at PODCASTCHEF.com. Before we go, we'd like to thank the sponsor of our show, Podcast Chef. Podcast Chef helps turn ordinary podcasting into a revenue-generating lead magnet for your consulting business. Our Podcasting Done For You service takes away the headache of starting up and running your own podcast. Reach out now to take advantage of our 30-day money-back guarantee. Visit us at podcastchef.com to find out how our team of experts can help you leverage podcasting to take your business to the next level.